The Captain's Log Radio with your host, Captain Jonathan Moss.
Hey, welcome to the Captain's Log Radio. I'm Captain Jonathan Moss. This is the Outdoor Radio Network, and I hope you just listened to On the Hook with Captain Bob. So excited to have been a guest with Captain Bob. We had a great show. And now we're here on the Captain's Log Radio. So thankful to have you sticking around on this radio journey. And I got with me today Captain Justin Anderson from Historic Coast Outfitters. They're in Florida's first coast, which if you're not familiar, that's Northeast Florida. So Jacksonville, St. Augustine, Palm Coast. Dude, what's going on, bro? We've been friends for a long time. And now we've been doing some fishing together. So good to see you. How you doing, brother?
Good, man. Same as you, busy running, nonstop. But enjoying it. But yeah, just busy, man. Busier than ever. So good
Absolutely.
problem.
That's a great problem to have. Justin and I have been friends on social media for a long time. And I'm actually embarrassed to say we met in person for the first time back in December at the Skinny Water Culture Christmas party. And we're talking.
Yep.
I was like, dude, we need to film together. We need to get together, do some fishing. And we actually spent a redfish camp weekend together up in Steenhatchee, which was a lot of fun. Justin and I were the only two who weren't locals, who weren't from the area. So we were the underdogs having to go in and find some fish and fish some really tough conditions and a lot of wind and having anglers on our boat who we've never met before and kind of guiding them to their first opportunities at redfish on fly. And that was an absolute fun weekend, and I'm really looking forward to doing that again.
Yeah, man. That those camps are great. I've done a couple of them now, and Hunter's doing a great job with that. They're just fun. Like you're guiding, but there's a different feel to it because afterwards we're going over to the house and eating with the clients and hanging out and getting to talk fishing with them. So it's more of an experience, which to me, I love that. Like,
Yeah.
don't get me wrong, I love the day-to-day trips too. But when you can kick back and get to know somebody, outside of the boat, it's
Yes.
nice.
Yes. And I don't know about you, but I gained like 10 pounds because the food was good, man. We got taken care of.
Yeah, the crazy thing about the last one we were on, oh man, his name's slipped my mind. The chef,
Dewan.
Dewan. I don't
Yeah.
like salmon, right, at all. I hate salmon. I can't like the taste of it. He had those grilled cheese, and I didn't know what was in it. And I picked it up and I ate, and I was like, "Man, this is really good." I was, what's in this?" And he said the salmon, and I was like, "All right, well, I guess I can say I like salmon now if it's in a grilled cheese."
So for some reason, we're 3 days on the water, and these clients are paying a premium to have a first class experience. And I'm not gonna lie, I'll be completely honest. I was struggling to find fish, and I had gone up and I had pre-fished and I'd found fish, but I couldn't get them to eat. Like I was like, what is going on? And then every afternoon, something happened as that high tide switched, okay, and that water starts flowing out. I would go to the back of these creeks and I would find so many redfish. And I was like, man, we were whacking them. And I
Yeah,
was like, looking at my guys, and I was like, look, and Dewan was one of them. I was like, I ain't going in. Like, we've had to work all day. Now time's up and it's time to go. I don't think so. I'm staying as long as we can until the fish stop biting. So we fished that tide hard. I think I was the last one in all 3 days. But
you were.
that particular night, I get there to the captain's or the client house, and you walked over to me and said, Jonathan, go get you one of them those grilled cheese sandwiches. And I was like, what? He's like, go over there and get one of those grilled cheese sandwiches. And I was like, okay, like you're being pretty like adamant about this. I'm gonna go get one. So I grabbed one. I took the lid off of it. I grabbed one. I took a bite, and I immediately turned around and grabbed two more. They were legit, bro. I don't know what that man made, but they were so good.
Shout out to Juan because those things were
Yeah.
delicious. But I kind of did that same thing over there because, like you said, it was a different fishery for what I'm used to. So I just thought logic back home, redfish are redfish. They're going to move to the furthest point with the tide. So I was
Yep.
like, if the creeks are all accessible, I just would, go in there, and we did find some good redfish back in the, back there for sure.
Yeah, yeah, and that was the ticket. Listen, that was probably, filming a TV show where I am traveling all over the country, the Southeast. I'm fishing in new places. I love that. I love exploring new water. I love fishing with guides from all over the country and experiencing their fishery and learning tips and tricks. Just like when I filmed a fish with you a couple of months ago. I love doing that. And then taking that experience and putting it in place in, my waters, but there is the same deal. It's like, okay, I've got pressure because I've got clients on my boat who I really want them to experience the utmost red fishing experience for a redfish camp. And then two, I've got the pressure of I don't live here. I pre-fish and I know my way around, but I've got to really work to get fish in the boat. And it ended up we got fish. We've ended up finding them every day and had a lot of fun. And if you aren't used to doing or haven't experienced doing like a fish camp kind of style where you're going, there's like 10 or 12 guys, go do it. These hosted trips are a lot of fun, a lot of fun.
Yep.
And
That
so if you have that opportunity, do it.
100%, I agree. That's kind of like what our base starting Historic Coast on was, because I was looking around and me and my buddies were doing those kind of trips, and I started guiding, and I was like, man, not everyone can afford 5, 8, 10, 15 grand to go to wherever the new place is. But you could go somewhere in the United States that's within a reasonable drive, pay $1,800 for a few days of guided fishing, lodging, meals, and be treated like you're at a 5-star resort.
Yeah.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And make it more accessible to people, because times are tough right now. The economy's tough. This is a service business, ultimately. And people don't have to fish. You know what I mean? They don't have to go fish. So
Yeah.
anything that you can do to help that and make it, beneficial for them more than, traveling is expensive. So,
Well, you don't just experience catching fish. You end up
right.
building relationships with the guides, with the other clients that are there. You become lifelong friends. I still talk to these guys that I met on the
Yeah.
redfish camp. So these are things that happen when you go. Let's transition a little bit. We got 5 minutes left in this segment. We're about halfway through. Let's transition a little bit to your story. How did you get into guiding? Tell me about you. Who is Justin Anderson?
So starting off, man, I've always fished and hunted my whole life growing up. I lived in like the outskirts of Jackson, St. Augustine here, which is now grown up and overpopulated. But I always grew up and I leaned more to hunting early on. Um, but I always fished. Well, as I got older, I got into salt water. I had a couple of friends who taught me some things about the salt water. My dad always did salt water, but he was more like offshore guy. And that just didn't interest me personally at a younger age. Now I don't mind it. But anyway, so that led on. I had a friend who was guiding at the time, and basically he wanted to transition to more deep water stuff. He didn't want to do any inshore. And I was starting to catch on to things pretty good. And I kind of got into fly fishing around that same time, and I fell in love with sight fishing and fly fishing. And that
Yeah.
sent me to the deep end. Well, he was like, look, man, I'll refer you some trips. You know what I mean? Like you're there, you're ready. And I don't know, like I've only been doing it a few years at this point, but at the beginning, it's hard knowing when you go fish and having that confidence to want to go put clients on fish every day. There's a big difference,
Yeah.
And I was always hesitant because I'm like, yeah, I can go fish and I can catch fish, but that's not me putting people on fish day in, day out. So I hesitated for a little while, but that was kind of like the jump start into it. He kind of encouraged me. And it kind of went from there. And then I had the idea from Court Douthit down there in Tampa. He had the guide houses and all. And so I had a couple of buddies who were wanting to start the guide around the same time I did. And I said, well, look, instead of us all competing against each other, let's make it where we can host group trips. Let's work together, build one brand where, if, no matter who they book with Historic Coast, they know they're getting a good product, they're getting good service, they're getting on
Love that.
fish. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? And there's a standard to it. So that's kind of how it all morphed. And honestly, it was something that no one had done that I could talk to and pick their brain. I fished with a lot of guides to kind of see how I wanted to operate as a guide, but there wasn't a business plan or someone for me to follow too much in the United States.
Yeah.
So just kind of my thinking of something, I was like, I'm going to do it, and see where it goes. And so far, we've been very blessed, and lucky,
Yeah.
being in
What
going in
year
our.
did y'all launch? When did Historic Coast launch?
I'm trying to think because the idea of it launched before we had to go through captain school, and you know what I mean. I knew I wanted to be a guide, but at the time the Coast Guard took it was during like the early COVID
Yeah.
era, and the Coast Guard was a nightmare to work with, and get it. So it took months, like 6 to 8 months, almost a year. Some of them, like it was just a backup. So I want to say we launched the idea in around 2022 is when it became an official business name. This is what we're doing. This is the plan.
Yeah.
And then we went from about a year of planning and structuring and doing stuff to there. So officially 2024, late 2023, 2024 is when it hit the ground running, when we were licensed guiding, moving on.
Love it, man. Love it. You know, to fill in some gaps there with the Coast Guard deal, for us licensed captains, we have to renew every 5 years. And so if you are in that period of sending in your really extensive paperwork and application, even for renewals to the Coast Guard, it is a waiting game. They have to
Mhm.
review it. If there's an issue, if there's a problem, they send it back. It just takes a long time. If you are a captain, do not wait. A year out from your expiration, start working on it. And if you're thinking about getting it, these are steps that you have to think about. A lot of people want to go into becoming a guide and don't think about they don't know. You said it. There is no handbook. You can't go to Barnes and Noble. I don't even know if Barnes and Noble is still a thing, but you can't go to a bookstore and buy How to Be a Successful Fishing Guide for Dummies. It just doesn't exist. And the only way
Yep.
to do that is to, like Justin said, have some people who he spent money. He went fishing with guides. He asked them questions. He learned
Yeah.
their tips and tricks by spending time with him and paying to spend time with him and saying, oh man, I really like this, or I really don't like this, or so those are ways that if you want to be a guide, those are things to think about. But there are lots of other steps. It's more than just getting up and going fishing every single day, which is what a lot of my friends think I do. We got 40 seconds.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot more when you dive into it. I mean, it's a process, and there's no quick way around it. You have to do it step by step. You have to do as they ask, or it's not going to work. And on top of that's just getting your license, and then
Yeah.
there's learning to becoming there. Then there's learning to become a guide, and that's a hands-on experience.
Absolutely. Hey, we got Captain Justin Anderson from Historic Coast Outfitters with us today. We got so much to talk about. We're going to dive in a little bit deeper for inshore fishing in that Northeast Florida section, but still stuff that you can use all over the Southeast. Captain Jonathan Moss is the Captain's Log Radio. Don't go anywhere.
This is the Captain's Log Radio with your host, Captain Jonathan Moss. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Captain's Log Radio with your host, Captain Jonathan Moss.
Hey, welcome back to the Captain's Log Radio. We got an hour show. This is segment number 2. I got Captain Justin Anderson with me from Historic Coast Outfitters up there in the St. Augustine area. But before we continue, guys already know, I want to invite you to follow along on all of the adventures at the Captain's Log TV on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. We got a brand new season 7 of the Captain's Log. It's releasing July 5th. This Saturday, July 5th, and I'm really stoked about that because we're going to be on Discovery Channel this year. We're going to stay with Waypoint as well, and then we're going to be on YouTube. So however you consume fishing, whether that's streaming or cable or on YouTube, you can watch the Captain's Log TV Season 7, a brand new season coming out starting this Saturday, July 5th. Of course, I want to see all of your adventures, so make sure you're tagging and hashtagging and all that good stuff on the socials at the Captain's Log TV so I can see what you're doing. I can see what you're catching. Justin, let's talk fishing, buddy. You've built this incredible brand of Historic Coast Outfitters. Tell me about your guide service. Tell me about the guys. Tell me about what kind of fish are you chasing on the daily?
So the kind of unique thing about us, every guide is we all do the same similar thing, right? We all like sight fishing, we all like fly fishing, but we all do it all. We're not a fly. A lot of people, because of our media and our videos, think that we're dominantly fly fishing. We all love that. I love to do it maybe one day, but right now we like to do everything. And each guide's a little diversified. So we'll start out like Carson Kent, Captain Carson. He's our youngest guide. but he's obviously like a kind of like one of our most diverse. Right now, he's into big bull redfish, big tarpon. He's dialed in like not only during daytime but nighttime trips, which are a lot of fun during the summer here because it's so
Yeah.
hot in the day. And I'm
Yeah.
talking about big fish, not we're talking mid 40s on redfish, and you're sight casting to these fish a lot of times.
Wow.
So he's doing that. He's big on the jig game and stuff like that, big swim baits. Like he's got a variety of stuff. He's kind of
Sure.
dialed into that more than any of us. And then you have like Captain Mike Keith, who's on the opposite end of the spectrum. He's the oldest by age guy in the team, and he's diverse when it comes to artificials or live bait or going sheep's head. Like he's very species oriented. So he's kind of a jack of all trades, right?
Mm.
Then you have
He's
like
he's the oldest, but he's a stud. He was our camera boat operator, wasn't he?
yeah, he's the
Okay,
yeah,
okay. Same guy.
he's in
Yeah,
good
he's a
shape.
stud. He's the oldest, but he's a stud, bro. Don't downplay that. That man's
We
working
call him
hard.
we call him Pow Pow.
No.
He's like old Gramps, take care of all of us. But yeah, he does. He's very diversified. And then as far as the fly fishing goes, we have Captain Joey Preston, who actually in reality taught myself and a couple other ones how to fly fish. If it wasn't for him, I'd have never picked up a fly rod. And turns out he ended up guiding, with me. So we have a pretty divided. Then there's Mike Crawford. He's good at cast and blast, and he's got a dog, so people love the dog aspect. Mike
Cool.
Keith has a dog, so they're kind of diversified. Brian Ennis right now that guides for us is actually guiding over in Alaska. He does, time over there. So
Mm.
we have a very diversified team, and I did that on purpose because each angler is different, right? We may get along, but you may learn better from someone else. So I wanted a broad spectrum of guys that could cover any realm. We have Captain Chris Schultz, who does the offshore stuff.
Yeah.
If I have an offshore guy that wants a trip, I bring Captain Chris in and he runs offshore for us. And you've done episodes with him.
Yeah.
So I have it from one end of the spectrum to the other. And I wanted that so we never really had to turn down a trip. You know what I mean? If
Cool.
someone called me and they want to go catch sheepshead, okay, well, here's the guy who's dialed in on sheepshead. And we can all do it all, but it's good to have a little specialty in the
Yeah,
mix.
absolutely. Okay, so tell me about you. You are focused in on the inshore redfish, trouts, flounder in your area.
Yep. That's the three that I really focus on, with redfish being primarily the big one. I do trout fish and I do flounder fish. Do I call myself an expert in those areas? Not by any means. I'm not an expert in any of them, but redfish, I'm strong. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Trout, I'm
yeah,
strong, but redfish is what I love also. It's my passion. Like they are the fish that got me fired up to want to be a guide. Tarpon come, we get them when they come through, other than at night on the bridges and stuff like that. So I do a little bit of tarpon fishing, but redfish is my game. I love the flood season. It's by far my favorite time of the year. It's the most visual, they're the most active, they're most ready to eat. Clients love it because of the setting, the sunsets, the Spartina
yeah.
grass. It's just, if you've done it, if you haven't, you need to. That's my favorite time.
I had, I want to say that flood tide redfishing is my favorite.
It's
They're
you
just
can't beat it.
they're a different animal. You know,
Yeah.
it's a you have a window. Okay, if you're not familiar with the flood tide redfishing, flood tide means it's a high tide, but it's higher than normal. So what is your normal dry Spartina grass ground is now underwater. And all these little fiddler crabs that are running and crazy, running amok, living on that land are now having to escape. And they escape the water by climbing up the grass. And then the shrimp are in there. There's other crabs in there. And so these redfish, and it's fascinating to watch. Like I say book a trip and tell the guide I want to get there an hour early and just sit and watch. Because as that
It's so
water rises up, you see the fish. And especially if you
yeah.
know where they're going to funnel in, sometimes there's openings, sometimes there's kind of a cut and they funnel in. You can literally watch the fish move onto that Spartina grass that's now flooded or flooding and see the fiddlers come up, see the shrimp pop in, and now you work your way onto that flat, that's not a flat, it's just that ground, that flood, and you're pulling over that
Island.
water. Yeah, that
Yeah.
island, that's what it was
Yeah.
before. And you're pulling over it and you're seeing these fish up on the surface, feeding and tailing and pushing and waking and backing and all of the things, right? And it is a visual, it's cinema. It is unbelievable. If you love chasing redfish, if you love sight fishing, it is unbelievable. And those fish are there to do one thing, Justin. And what is that? What are they there to do?
They're there to eat.
There to eat. And so if you can make the right presentation, whether that be a frog on the surface or throwing a gurgler, a fly,
Yeah.
whatever, they're going to crush it. If you make the right presentation, they're going to crush it. What do you like to chase them with? Are you mainly doing fly? You doing artificial? What's your go-to?
Both.
Tell me
Um,
both.
yeah, both. A couple nights ago, I had a client who was 61 years old. Spin fished a lot. Actually, fished the lagoon a good bit from Central Florida. Just moved up here. Shout out Scott, great guy. Dude, he could cast, and
Cool.
I throw a lot. I mean, I don't care to tell people. It's fine. The Z-Man baby goats, if you're familiar with those,
I'm
they
not.
have the two little. They're like they're a short bait. And they have two little paddle tails that stick off the end. They're
Huh.
very finessey though. Put them on a bullet head weight, and the good thing about that bait is you can pull it across the top so it flutters just a little bit.
Goes like
Or
a
if they're
frog.
tailing and their heads down, you can let it fall and then those legs just flopping. So
Huh.
it's hard, it doesn't get refused. And I
Huh.
won't say it won't, but it's been very successful. And we had a real short window that night, and dude, we caught a pile of fish, and we had a very fun night, and it was on that one bait. But I mean, there's a variety of stuff you can use. It's not so much. I won't say that they're not picky, because later in the season they will get picky a little bit. But early on, man, it's more about placement and reaction to those fish because they are so aggressive on the flat. Every now and then you got to finesse one, but you kind of read them. You know how they're moving through the water. If they're floating and kind of barely moving, you don't want to plop something in front of them. But if they're tailing and you've seen them, they're active. They'll bury their heads, and if they're feeding, you just get it from. They're going to eat it. I don't want to be simplistic about it, but it's that they're there to eat, and
Yeah.
most of the time, if you make a proper presentation you more than likely you're going to get rewarded. Key is proper presentation without spooking them.
Yeah.
You can't flop it an inch from their face most of the time. You got to be a little finesse and bring it to them, but you're generally going to get rewarded by redfish. Now you'll see sheep's head up there. You'll see some black drum up there occasionally. Sheep's, that's another game. They're a little more picky. You got
Yep.
to be a little
Yep.
bit more finesse with them, but they can be caught as well. So
Huh. Have you taken a sheep's on fly?
no,
Yeah.
I actually haven't. I've casted at a bunch of sheep on fly here in Louisiana. I I've had them nibble and come tight, get off. Like I've had
Man,
people catch them on my boat, but I haven't had. I just can't. I guess I'm cursed by the sheep with a
yeah,
fly.
I've hooked probably half a dozen on fly, and I've yet to land one. That's how it works. They got them buck teeth. If you don't hook one just
Dude,
right, it ain't gonna happen.
yeah. I mean, yeah. I don't know. Not that I gave up on them, but they frustrated me. I mean, you're a sheep head. You're not a
They're-
permit.
yeah,
It shouldn't be
yeah,
this hard to catch them.
right,
But
right.
apparently it is that hard.
Well, I've thrown going back to the redfish on the flood. I've thrown frogs at them. I've thrown
Yeah.
that PT7 from DOA. I like getting a DOA shrimp, biting the tail off, and rigging it weedless, because then you can bomb it out there and it won't hook the grass. It can swim
Yeah.
up on the surface. You can drop it back down. I use that owner twist lock, 3-aught twist lock hook, with like
Yeah.
an 1/8 ounce. You can cast it a mile. That's another good option. If you want to add some rattles, you can put a rattle into it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all about presentation, and that's sight fishing. We got a minute left, but that's all about sight fishing. If you can make the right presentation to a
Yeah.
fish, more than likely you're going to get rewarded. If that fish doesn't spook off while you're casting and you present that lure or that fly or that bait in front of them, and if you do it correctly, they're going to reward it. And I say all the time, there are 3 jobs that have to happen. Number 1, the guide has to take you to the fish. Okay.
Yep.
Number 2, you as the angler have to present to the fish, okay, and present to the fish properly, correctly, not just slam it out there in front of them and hope they eat it, but correctly present the lure or fly or bait to the fish. And number
Yeah.
three, the fish has to eat it. And if none of the three happen, if two of the three happen, if one of the three happen, it doesn't matter. If you are missing one, it's not going to happen. You're not going to catch fish. And so that is a huge part to your success in sight fishing is all three jobs have to happen. Hey, I'm Captain Jonathan Moss. Got Captain Justin Anderson with me from Historic Coast Outfitters. This is the Captain's Log Radio here on the Outdoor Radio Network. We got more to talk about, so don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after a quick break. Thanks for listening. I'm Captain Jonathan Moss.
This is the Captain's Log Radio with your host, Captain Jonathan Moss. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Captain's Log Radio with your host, Captain Jonathan Moss.
Hey, welcome back to the Captain's Log Radio. I'm Captain Jonathan Moss. I got Captain Justin Anderson with me from Historic Coast Outfitters. Before the break, we were talking flood tide fishing for redfish, throwing artificials. Okay, we made some recommendations. Typically, well, let's hit the rods first because we didn't talk about rods and reels. When I'm doing that inshore, it's just when we're doing the flood tide, it's just like inshore fishing. You know, that 7-foot or 7.6 medium rod with the 1,000 all the way to like a 3,000 series reel is a perfect setup. And what do you think about that, Justin?
That's perfect. The grass can be tricky sometimes. I use 3,000 series reels on all my stuff, 2,500s, something around there. You can go down to 1,000. The grass can be a little tough for that. Fly rods, anywhere from a 6 weight to an 8 weight. Most people use 7 or 8s, but if you're a little experienced angler, you're used to pulling on fish, 6 weight's perfectly fine in a flood.
Awesome. What
like
size
you said,
leader for the spinning rods? So you stick it
we
or you bumping up?
16 to 20. You don't need anything more than
I never go below 20. I
that.
had some
Yeah,
fish break off in like 15, and I was pretty much only 15. And then clients would have fish going in the mangroves. I was like, nope, no more. I'm bumping up. I go no minimum of 20.
yeah, you can have 20. I mean, my stuff's 20, but you could still do it 16 to 20. Fly wise, gurglers, like you said, crab patterns, flexo crabs work really good in the flood tide. Shrimp patterns. Biggest thing with any of them, you have to have good weed guards. You're in the grass. You got to be able to pop it off quick. You can't, you're going to get it. You're going to have to slide it through grass. It's not like fishing on the Gulf Coast where the grass is under the water. This is going to come up. You're going to be pulling it literally through the grass.
So I have a beat up gurgler here. It's no good anymore. But for those who don't know, okay, a gurgler is a topwater fly. It's actually, Justin, the fly that got me into fly fishing. And there's a story behind that. I was poor and I bought a gurgler at the fly shop. I think I spent $9. And I thought, bro, that's a lot of money for one little fly. But I didn't care. I was going to go and catch a juvenile tarpon with it. And I got to my spot and I'm on foot. I don't even, at this point, I didn't have a skiff at this point. I don't even think I had my Ginu then. I think I was just kayak fishing, but I was on foot and I saw these tarpon rolling and I was like, all right, game on. I'm going to catch me a tarpon. And so I made a beautiful cast. And brother, it was the longest cast up to this point in my life that I ever made. Right into a chain link fence that went into the water, and the fly never hit the water. And I'm like, no, I can please come off. So I'm like working it, like, please, Jesus, let this thing come off. There's also like a 10-foot alligator right beside the fence in the water. So there was no way I was going in after it. And I'm working that rod, please, praying. And the line broke. And there sat my fly, my $9 fly. And I was like, all right, I'm done. Like, I packed my stuff. I went home. I was so mad. And then I decided, okay, I'm going to buy a vise. I'm going to buy material. I'm going to spend like $700 and I'm going to tie as many flies as I can. But it all started with the gurgler. Now, I have a gurgler with me and the hook rides down. I don't know if you guys can see that, but the hook rides down and this one's busted, but there's a piece of foam up top and it's like a popper. So I like a little heavier foam because I really want to push some water. I really want it to make some noise. I have a bass charter in the morning, and we're going to be throwing gurglers around lily pads for these bass. It's a great, great fly. You can throw them in the flood for redfish. But what Justin is talking about is with that exposed hook, and that hook's going to ride down. It's really important that there is a weed guard because if you see a fish and you make your presentation and you hook grass, what good is it? You ain't gonna do nothing. You're gonna catch a fish if it's all fouled up.
Yep.
What size are you using that hard mono? I got some right here. I typically
Yeah.
do like that 20 a Mason hard mono
Yep.
for my weed guard. Is that what you're using?
Yeah. Same thing.
Yeah,
I
it's
actually made a great deal. I tied flies for a while and I got really into it. But Joey is the one, Joey Preston I mentioned, is a phenomenal fly tire. Like ties for
oh
a lot of shoots and stuff. So I'm busy with dad, two kids, guiding life. So I made him a heck of a deal. I said, hey, listen, you need materials. I have a ton of materials, a really nice vise. I'm going to give you all this and you just tie me flies. And we shook on it. And so now I just put in an order to him and whatever I need. And he tied better flies than me anyway. So, I
listen,
mean, it was a win
I'm
win.
I'm gonna slip you an order, okay? And then you're gonna
Yeah.
tell Joey that it's for you. And then
Bring it
I'll
on,
slip
brother.
you like a 20. You can mail them to
Yeah.
me.
He'll do it. He'll hook you up.
When
He,
I was, go ahead.
he loves to see people use his flies, man. You got to check out his stuff. He's a phenomenal fly tire. Very, like I said, he's
That's
the reason I
awesome.
got into fly fishing. So knowledgeable guy, but he ties some killer flies.
I shouldn't tell you this. I probably shouldn't talk about it on air, but I'm gonna do it anyways. When I was a teacher, right? I used to be a PE teacher, elementary school PE teacher. I had 60 kids at a time. And in Orange County, here in Orlando, the rule was if it was 50 degrees or colder, that we were not allowed to go outside for PE because most of our kids were low income, didn't have jackets, wouldn't show up with a jacket even if they had it because it's cool not to wear a jacket. Though right now it's cool for the kids to wear sweaters, hoodies when it's 100 degrees outside. But when it's cold outside and you actually need a hoodie, they wouldn't show up with one. And so I'd have 60 kids. I had a portable. What are you going to do in a portable with 60 kids? Okay. It's designed for like 15, and there's 60 of us in there and two adults. I put on Finding Nemo, of course. So we'd sit there and watch a movie, and I would bring my vise to school and all my material, and I would tie flies. I'd get all of my spring box and my summer box. I'd get all that done when the kids were watching the movie, and I was freezing my tail off. Now, I could only do that for a few days because I'd go stir crazy sitting inside of a room all day long.
Yeah.
But as soon as it warmed up, man, we were outside playing. But I took advantage of those hours of sitting. You know, you turn a movie on for a kid and they focus and get real quiet and it's like, okay, I can sit here. And every once in a while, you'd have a kid come over and go, Coach, what are you doing? What are you making? I'm like, it's arts and crafts for grown men over here. That's what we're doing. And we had a
Pretty
lot
much.
of fun doing that. Yeah, man. I enjoy tying flies. Now it's more of a tie out of necessity. I don't sit and just do it for fun anymore. It's I got a trip tomorrow and I got to tie some flies kind of deal.
That's where I was at with it. And then it was like I said, I have a about to be 16-year-old and about to be a 5-year old. So my son's playing high school baseball. Like it's like, man, I got a trip tomorrow. I'm not gonna miss this game to sit here and tie flies. Like when I got a guy that can tie them way better than me anyway.
Yeah,
So just for me it made sense. And I was like, here you go, man. So far it's
that's
worked out.
awesome.
But another one of my favorite flies are the Quans. I mean,
Mm,
I know they do great down where you're at too, the lagoon area. So,
yes,
he's phenomenal at those. Like we throw those a lot up here as well. The Quans are another good fly. We use them a lot in low tide.
awesome. Well, we had an opportunity a couple months back to get together and do some fishing. Now we didn't throw fly, Maybe we'll do that this next go around, but we did a lot of inshore sight fishing, and we had we planned the day where we fished both tides. We fished the low tide and the high tide, the incoming, the outgoing. We made sure we had plenty of water, and then we made sure we had absolutely no water. At one point, we had so little water, we were stuck, and we had to wait for the tide to come up.
Yeah.
I did a radio show about that where somebody decided to slip beside us while we were waiting for the tide to get right to go
Oh
into the back
man.
of a creek. I don't want to
Yeah.
go into it because I'll get upset and annoyed. But I had a guy the other day motor around me. I was fishing a shoreline, motor around me, and plopped his trolling motor about 100 feet in front of me and started fishing. I was like, well, I guess we're going to leave now. We're not going to go that way. People do stuff
Yeah.
like that. It's crazy. But we had an opportunity to chase some redfish, chase some trout, and one of my favorite things about your area outside of the flood tide is those creeks. I love going to those creeks, and those creeks are full of mud, and those creeks are full of oysters, and those creeks are full of grass and bait fish and redfish. Tell me about those
Yeah.
creeks. Tell me about that style of fishing.
So we get a big tidal swing here, anywhere from 4 to 6.5, 7 feet some days. So there's a lot of water movement. There's a lot of structure. There's oyster bars. There's big sand flats in those creeks. There's big mud flats in those creeks. So there's a lot of opportunity for fish to be able to smash bait. On an incoming tide, there's a lot of stuff pushing bait when that tide's coming in. So as you've seen, like I always tell people, like we're going to get to a certain point and the fish are going to have to come to us, at some point in those creeks. If you know where they stage up and you know how they maneuver during those tides, that's how you kind of target them. A lot of people just go out and they don't think too much to water movement, but fish follow water movement. They have to, especially here
Yeah.
where a lot of areas drain out. So that's kind of one of the coolest things to me. And clients, like clients get amazed, daily at how much that water moves, especially if you got a longer trip where they get to see both ends of it. We'll go into the
Yeah.
grass when it's topped out and you're floating over the grass. Well, 5, 6 hours later, you're looking and there's no water within, a few hundred yards of where you were. So
Yeah.
it's cool to watch that much movement. And, that's the biggest thing. Water movement here is key, for this style of fishing.
Well, what I loved about it is we're creeping into these creeks. The water's coming in, and a lot of times the back of these creeks there is a hole where the water is caught. It can't go any further out, and the fish are caught in there, and they'll just
Mhm.
hang out and wait. And as that water gets higher, okay, you start moving back into these little holes, these little pockets, and you're finding fish and you're catching fish and you're finding fish that are willing to participate. Same deal,
Yep.
the fish will also, as the water's moving out, will then work their way out, the ones that don't get stuck in those little ponds, if you will, and they're working their way out. And now you have another situation to fish. As the water moves out, you move out and you're finding fish crawling and creeping and pushing out of the creeks. And that's just another opportunity for you to look for moving fish, to look for sight fishing, for look for tails, look for
Yeah.
fish blowing up on baits. It is a lot of fun. We've got 20
When it,
seconds left in the segment. When we get back, I want to talk more about inshore fishing in that St. Augustine area. Maybe we'll dabble a little bit into the offshore tarpon sea and the nearshore stuff that's going on right now. But when we get back, more with Captain Justin Anderson from Historic Coast Outfitters. Don't go anywhere. I'm Captain Jonathan Moss. This is the Captain's Log Radio. We'll be right back.
This is the Captain's Log Radio with your host, Captain Jonathan Moss. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Captain's Log Radio with your host, Captain Jonathan Moss.
Hey, welcome back to the Captain's Log Radio. I got Captain Justin Anderson from Historic Coast Outfitters with me. Last segment, we've had a lot to talk about. Talk about flood tide, talk about Justin, his history, his story, talk about his guide service. We were talking about fishing creeks before the end, and I want to finish that because I said some things, and I want to kind of explain them. So we talked about fish crawling, and on the commercial break, Justin was like, "Hey, let's talk about that," because a lot of anglers have never experienced that. I love seeing them crawl. it's amazing when I have anglers from all over the country. And we're in skiffs. We're in boats that they're shallow draft skiffs. They're floating in nothing. Okay. And clients looking at me and go, there's no fish up here. Why are we fishing so shallow? Fish don't get this shallow. And I was like, oh yeah, just watch. And it's
Yeah.
amazing that these redfish will have their literally half of their body
Mhm.
out of the water. Tell me about that, Justin.
So I've had people from all over the state, from in other areas of the country that redfish. They come here and I say we're gonna look for crawling fish, and they think they know what that means. But here they get super shallow. They're not just bumping with their back. Like a lot of places, you'll see the arch of the back. Here they're literally crawling. You'll see their eyes out of the water sometimes, the whole top half of
Yeah.
their body. They're going up and they're busting on shrimp on the banks of these creeks. So they're theoretically pushing the shrimp up onto the bank to ambush them or whatever. But watching them with birds, like I tell people all the time, I'm like, we start seeing birds, I'm like, we're gonna see some fish, and people will laugh at me, and I'm like, watch the birds work these creeks. Spoonbill, for instance, if they're walking up the bank and you see them back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and watch the little shrimp popping up around them, majority of the time there's going to be a redfish near that area. There's bait, there's water movement, there's everything you need in the back of those creeks. So you'll literally see a redfish crawling across the bank with their back out of the water, and you may or may not see the wake. Sometimes there'll be just enough under the surface, but you'll watch them and you'll see shrimp pop up, right? And those spoonbills are following them, or a heron, or whatever it may be that day. But I notice a lot of times it's spoonbills. So that's something people do not see when they see the fish crawling and just in their natural habitat, unbothered, unspooked, feeding and doing their thing, people freak out. And rightfully so. That's why I fell in love with it. I mean, there's
Yeah.
not much cooler than seeing that. Someone with a hunting background, a spot and stalk and bow hunting and being close to animals. That's what made me fall in love with fly fishing and sight fishing in general, is watching those fish and being that close to them. It's
That's
awesome.
that's what it is.
Yeah.
It is literally hunting. And
Yep.
that's the excitement. You got two guys on the boat, one on the bow, one on the back. Dude in the back's got a push pull. You're getting skinny. He's elevated. He's on a pulling platform over the motor. He's got a higher point of view so he can see down into the water. Okay, and you're looking, and you're pushing, and you're trying to be quiet. You're trying to be stealthy. Or you're not slamming hatches. You're not moving around. You're
Pumping on
still.
the boat.
You're literally pushing down this shallow water, and you're looking for these fish, and then you see
Yeah.
one. And it's typically, it could go either way. The guy in the front of the boat could see it first, because
Mhm.
he's got a different perspective and he's scanned. The guy on the back of the boat might see it first, and then you have to communicate with each other. Okay, and this is the part that I'm gonna guess. Justin and I haven't talked about this. I'm gonna guess this is Justin's favorite part because you're communicating with your angler, and you have to point out where the fish is, and then when they see it, that moment. It's like, oh, I see the fish. And then they make the presentation because you don't just want to cast willy nilly, hope to get in the right spot. You want to wait till the angler see the fish because when you do, then you can make the right presentation. We talked about that earlier. You can make the right presentation because now you know where to cast. You know where the fish is going. You know what direction they're facing. You know how fast they're swimming, how slow they're swimming. Maybe they're not swimming at all. You figure it all out once you see the fish. And in this situation where
Yeah.
they're belly crawling, dude, when we were filming, we didn't have one belly crawl. Remember, we went up into a creek and there wasn't enough water, so we bumped a bunch of fish inside of that creek, and then we turned
Yeah.
around and we were working our way out, and I saw one. Maybe one of us saw one. I think you saw it on the shoreline, and then I saw it, and I pitched out in front of it, and he was swimming. He wasn't crawling yet. He had enough water, but he was pushing water, and I threw it up on the
Mhm.
bank and brought it down in front of him. He smoked it. I can't wait for you guys to see it on the episode. But that's what it
Yeah.
is. It's that
And
tag
not,
team.
yep. And it's not just one fish. You come here in the fall, wintertime, we'll be in a creek 4 to 5 foot wide and 8 inches of water, and you may see 40, you may see 50, you may see 60. you may see a school bigger than that of fish
Mm.
crawling and blowing up shrimp and coming down, and it looks like they're in no water. You'll be amazed at how are these fish doing this? But that's where they live. Those fish, that's their home. They're safe back there. Dolphins can't get that shallow generally. There's plenty
Yeah.
of bait back there. So, it's a good place to be if you're a redfish.
You have my number, right? You're like gonna be like, yeah.
Oh
Call
yeah.
when you got
Oh
like
yeah.
40, 50, 60 in the back of a creek, you better call me. I want to go and do that. That sounds
Oh man,
amazing.
fall is the best around here. It's my favorite because there's a certain period during the fall where in one day we could fish low tide with those fish and hit a flood tide in the afternoon tide. So
Mm.
there's certain times where it falls just right where you can get both in a day. Those are fun. It doesn't happen often, but if you can line one of those up, it's usually a pretty good day. So,
Well, let's
but the fall is good, man.
let's pause and let's talk about what is your current fishing forecast? Let's talk about what you're doing and then what can we expect in the fall as we transition to fall. And I'm not gonna lie, bro, I am tired. It's hot. I am ready for fall. I'm ready for some
Yeah.
October cold fronts coming through, a little bit cooler temperature. I'm ready for a hoodie season. But tell me about what you got going on now, and then we'll transition to the fall.
So right now during the summer around here, normally we're on the beach for tarpon. I told you previous to the thing, there's some around right now. It's not prime time. It's not going off. It's not a good season so far. That could change going in towards the fall with the mullet run and different things happening. But right now we're still on redfish. Um, early morning, late evening. If I'm running a trip right now, we're getting out there before daylight or an afternoon trip and we're staying right at dark. It's just hot during the day. Not that
Yeah.
you can't catch fish. Now, again, when I talk it me, it's primarily sight fishing. Most of my trips are going to be tailored towards that. So if you're doing bait, you can get away with some, day trips and stuff like that if you have a client that's willing to do that. But artificials, sight fishing, shallow water stuff, we want to be early morning, late evening,
If you're throwing
nighttime
bait,
trips. Nighttime
if you're
trips are fun.
if you're throwing bait, what's the bait of choice? Like shrimp?
Shrimp, mullet, yeah, mud minnows if you can get mud minnows.
Okay.
I like shrimp easy, especially if I'm doing a bait trip. Generally, it's someone who's newer to fishing, and we're doing either shrimp on a jig head, popping corks, getting them used to throwing fighting fish, having fun, and
Yeah. Good stuff.
working that angle. We're not getting too technical.
Cool. Cool. Any flounder around this time of year? When does flounder typically kick off?
Uh, Spring and fall, early, like we planned the freaking flounder episode. We were a couple of weeks early on it and ended up making it a slam. The people won't get to see that, but those are the prime times of the year. Sheep's head also in the fall, but right now trout. It's hot. Again, spring and fall. That's the best. Midsummer is tough. I tell a lot of people if you're traveling from far away, make it, not that we can't get on some good fish during the summer, but it's going to be a little slower and we're going to have to work a little harder and you're going to have to withstand some longer trips, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
So local people, though, early morning, late evening, get
Yeah.
out before degrees.
I'm pushing away at 5:45. There's enough light where I can see safely, and it's hard. My mindset is I need to get my clients on fish before it gets super hot and they shut down. But
Yeah.
that means, most of my clients are, and like myself, are driving over to the East Coast from Orlando. So they got an hour drive. You're on vacation. You got to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. That sucks. That's early.
It,
But that's the prime time.
it is, and it's all about the client experience. Like me and you love fishing. We're guides, right? It's tough. Middle of the day, dude, it's 100, 110. It's
Yeah.
tough. You want them to enjoy the experience. Catching fish is cool. Them having a heat stroke on your boat, if they can't handle it's
It's
not
not
cool.
cool. It's not cool.
So I keep my thing. Obviously, I'm a guide. I'm going to put you on fish, but I want to make sure you're going to have the best experience while you're on my boat. And
Yeah,
I
for
try
sure.
to let that dictate as much as the fishing. You know what I mean? I want to make them comfortable.
Yeah, absolutely. Transitioning into fall, we got 2 minutes left in the segment. Transitioning into fall, are you changing your tactics? Are you basically doing the same thing? You still finding these fish the same way, using the same lures, or is it completely different in the fall?
Oh, you change up tactics a little bit. Once it starts to cool off, the fish will be obviously early fall. They'll be real spunky, fired up. As that cooler water comes in, they get a little finicky, more finicky. The water clears up a little bit in the winter around here, fall going into winter. So you do have to be a little bit better with your presentation. When those fish are in those big schools, clearly you know how it is fishing the lagoon in big
Yeah.
schools. You
Yep.
got to be careful because the thing about the lagoon is it's open water, right? Here, where you've seen the backs of the creeks, you spook one fish, you're spooking the whole,
Whole group.
school of fish, and they're pushing up that creek, and it's going to be very hard to catch them after that. So you do
Yeah.
have to be a little bit stealthier, a little bit, you know, more careful and quiet and tactical as far as that. Downsize your baits just a little bit, flies a little bit smaller, casting, lead them a little bit further. I like to tell people 2 to 3 foot in front, 2 to 3 foot past them,
Yeah.
standard here.
Yeah.
That gives you time for your fly to land, splash, and then you work it a foot or two right into the zone.
Right to the zone.
So
Yep.
fly that's and then work artificial the same way.
Just
The
if
other thing
people
we do
want
in the
to
fall here.
go
Go
ahead, go
ahead.
ahead.
The other thing we do in the fall is the cast and blast on the floods. We didn't really talk about that. We do the marsh hens as well. So while you're going through the Spartina grass, poling will flush up clapper and king rail marsh hens. And
Love
so
it.
you use a 20 gauge shotgun, you keep 15 per person. They're not bad table fare, you know. So that's another popular thing in the fall. We're pretty slammed with that. We get more floods in the fall. So that's a big thing.
Awesome. Well, hey, it's been a pleasure having Captain Justin Anderson from Historic Coast Outfitters here on the Captain's Log Radio. I'll put all of his information in the description of the show. We'll see you guys next time. I'm Captain Jonathan Moss, and this is the Captain's Log Radio.
Thanks for listening to the Captain's Log Radio with your host, Captain Jonathan Moss.